And at this time, it is my distinct pleasure to invite Donna Kelly, who is Vice President of Community Development for LENNAR, to join me on stage. And I'm turning it over to you, my dear. I wanted to let you know there's plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of this presentation. So enjoy the program and welcome Donna Kelly.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited for the program and what we're going to hear with our speaker today, because I think one of the most important things we need to focus on is that there's no singular answer. We have to have multiple solutions for housing our very diverse community, and especially as we age. So the topic today is co-housing. And what is co-housing? That was actually my big question. And it's intentional collaborative housing which residents actively participate in the design and operation of their neighborhoods. And it provides the privacy that you typically would desire within your community. And I think that there's lots we can cultivate. We'll have a lot of questions for Rachel with this. But co-housing, it actually is existing within the United States. We probably have near 240 communities or properties that have co-housing. It's throughout the United States. There's quite a few, 40 in Northern California, with a very small complement here in Southern California. And I believe this to be seen as a growing trend. So how can we expand this? So it is truly my pleasure today to introduce our featured speaker, Rachel Caraviello. She's Vice President of Programs and Services for the Affordable Living for the Aging. And Rachel works on initiatives to address housing and service needs for older residents, older adults living in Los Angeles. And notably, she manages ALS shared housing program and the delivery of social services at housing sites for formerly homeless seniors, which touches my heart incredibly to think that we even have that. Rachel has received her Bachelor of Science in Design and Environmental Analysis from Cornell University and has a master's degree in gerontology from University of Southern California. So I would like you to join me in welcoming Rachel.
Good morning. I want to thank you so much, Donna, for that introduction, and thank you, Anthony and Ann, for inviting me to speak here today. I love any excuse to leave Los Angeles and head for the prettier, nicer beaches. Ann and Anthony took the time actually last month to come up to Los Angeles and visit 2 of our shared living residences, so they kind of know firsthand what they look like, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk more about it with you all. So affordable living for the aging has been around for about 36 years. Like Donna said, we believe that there is not one size fits all, and so we have a few different models, each for different populations of seniors. We do permanent supportive housing for homeless older adults who have mental health challenges, and that model provides a lot of intensive on-site services. We do shared living residences for more independent, active seniors that want a community. And we do roommate matching in private residences for older adults who want the support they need to stay in the home that they own. So a few different options. What I'm going to talk about today primarily is our shared living residences. And our founder, Janet Whitkin, who unfortunately passed away in 2009, she coined our motto, independence through interdependence, and this idea that we can go stronger, longer if we go together. Next slide. So shared housing and co-housing are sort of part of this broader approach to figuring out ways to give people choices for aging in their communities and the neighborhoods where they have family and friends, their social support system, their doctors, making it so that they can kind of bridge that gap between living entirely independently and needing a lot of skilled care, so that there's options sort of in between for them to maintain their independence while relying on the support of others. And the idea behind both models is that you need less resources if you can share some of the amenities. And so that's where sort of the affordable piece comes in, is if you don't need to have your own kitchen, but you can share it with some people, there's less of a cost there. All of these communities have a very strong sense of helping one another out. People come to these communities because they want opportunities to socialize and they don't want to be alone, and they're looking for ways to sort of reduce their isolation. The primary difference, though, that I did want to point out is on the left you can see a site plan of a sample co-housing community, and there the individual residences are separate. They're private residences, and they share common facilities. So there's this physical structure for people to come together for activities and events and really feel like they're a part of this community. In a lot of home sharing, shared living residences, everything is sort of under one roof. So I'll talk more about that. Just to back up and give you all a little bit of history of shared housing. The concept was started in the early 80s by Maggie Kuhn. How many of you have heard of Maggie Kuhn, the elder rights advocate? So Maggie Kuhn founded the Grey Panthers. She was forced to retire way back when they had the mandatory retirement age of 65. Because of her lobbying and advocacy efforts, they actually did away with the mandatory retirement age in 1986. But at that time, she had to retire, and she was really focused on healthcare reform, nursing home reform, and figuring out ways to honor older adults in a way that society wasn't honoring them. And so she actually shared herself. She had a large home in Philadelphia, and she would rent rooms in her house to younger activists as a way for her to stay involved and as a way for her to sort of bridge the gap between generations. She's very famous for saying old age is not a disease and old age is not a dirty word. We made some progress since then, but. So the two type of shared housing rental models that we do are shared living residences and match-up programs. And so shared living residences are also known as cooperative or communal living and group homes. The idea really is that it's like the Golden Girls model, only it's co-ed. And instead of Dorothy, Blanche, Rose, and Sophia, 4 women, we usually have about 10 to 14 seniors living under one roof. Seniors have their own private bedroom and private bathroom, and then they share the living area and the kitchen. Okay, next slide. And what shared housing does pretty effectively is it addresses individuals' financial needs, people living on fixed incomes, and it addresses the social needs of wanting some support and friendship. Okay, next slide. And I'm going to actually just have you skip ahead. I'm sorry. This one and this one doesn't. Okay, go back to that other. I'm going to show a quick little video, and this is of 2 of our residents living in our communities. I already moved this sound, so that's awesome. Yeah.
Every year, ALA helps more than 500 seniors access housing and services that are right for them. 60 of these seniors live in ALA's cooperative housing communities.
I was becoming isolated as I was getting older, and although I lived in a big apartment complex, I would go days without talking to anyone.
My children did not live in LA. They all lived pretty far away, and I knew that I would be away from them, and I needed a support system.
ALA knows that.
Okay, so those are 2 of our residents sharing examples of why they decided to live with us. And what they didn't talk about is that they also pay only $500 a month in rent, which leaves the rest of their Social Security check towards food and other living expenses that are necessary. Healthcare, yes. So this past year, the AARP Foundation got more interested in shared housing. And the AARP Foundation, as many of you might know, has a Housing Solutions Center, which is essentially a 1-800 housing help hotline. And older homeowners who are at risk of losing their home or having financial issues can call and get counseled from HUD-approved counselors on what their options are. And so AARP is interested in thinking about, well, how could shared housing programs support the Housing Solutions Center? And so they did a survey of 1,000 of their members in the general population and about 100 lower income members who actually called the Housing Solutions line for assistance and guidance. And what they were asking them is, what would motivate you to share? And about 58% of them said we would consider sharing, and these are the reasons why they would consider sharing. They would share because of cost of living increases and not having enough savings, so that's the financial piece. They would share to downsize in a way where they weren't responsible for as much of a house as they had been for very long if it's starting to get more difficult. And they would share to feel safer and more secure living with others. So many of the individuals who are attracted to this model are widowed, divorced, or never married and looking for that sort of companionship. There's a very strong relationship in this survey between people's earnings, being lower income, and then being open to this idea of pooling their resources. So. In 2012, ALA received some support from Enterprise Community Partners and the Archstone Foundation to really look at this at a national scale and develop some best practices based on programs that were operating in 28 different states. We focused a lot on a program in Texas, one in Chicago, Northern California, Maryland, and New Jersey. And next slide. What we did is we created a strategic guide looking at recommendations for how you can be successful developing shared living residences and what are some of the things that make programs high performing compared to others. Next slide. And we broke it down into design considerations, managing the tenant population, because the majority of these are owned and operated by nonprofit organizations who have a mission to serve individuals who have lower incomes. And community partnerships, so a way to sort of enhance the community by partnering with services that already exist. And groups across the country are doing this for several different populations, but primarily it's for older adults who are still independent, veterans, and single parents who are in transition. So some of the design considerations that people talk about is the kitchen. So you can imagine that that's an area where there's great opportunity for bonding and coming together around food, but that there's also an opportunity for conflict unless a lot of thought has been put into food storage space. And so one of the things is that it's really smart to provide a lot of different work surfaces, and dry storage is not as big of a challenge, but cold food storage is, and so really thinking about how you're accommodating however many people are living in that home. We also, ALA, most of our properties we rehabbed or developed into shared living back in the 80s. So our portfolio is aging, and as we think about rehabbing some of them again, we would do it a little bit differently, and we would probably put small, very small kitchenettes in each unit. And the kitchenette would be enough of like a microwave and a little sink area, but you would still be sort of encouraged to use the common facility, but it would just give people one more option so that they felt like they had some control over where they were preparing their meals. Another indicator of success is having multiple opportunities for people to interact in different spaces. And figuring out a way to maintain the fidelity of private spaces and that private boundary, as well as offering community spaces for them to either watch TV or do other activities. Additional storage is important because many of these individuals are downsizing, but they still need a space to keep some of their things. And then separate thermal zones are really important. And they weren't able to do this on one of our properties that was developed in 1985, and every summer there's someone living in this unit that is frozen out and everybody else in the house is really, really hot. So that'll be one of the first things we do on that property. Everyone regulates differently. You're hot, I'm cold. Giving people an opportunity to at least maintain the thermal environment of their individual unit is really important. And then for economies of scale, both in services and property management, thinking about clustering the properties together. So most of our properties are located in the Beverly Fairfax area of Los Angeles, near where the Grove is. Not only is it a wonderful neighborhood, it's very walkable, there are a lot of amenities for older adults, but it also makes it easier for us to keep track of what's going on. So that's one of our shared living residences just north of the Grove, and I include this photo because I like to show how easy it is to integrate them into the neighborhood. And this is I think it's an R1 zoned neighborhood, so all of these are rental properties, and there's individuals renting out rooms and apartments in these homes. And what we did was we took this duplex and turned it into 9 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms with a kitchen living area on the first floor, and then mirrored on the top another kitchen living area and some laundry facilities, with a little bit of parking in the back. This is a second site that we have just south of there. This is Paul. He's a retired LAUSD teacher. And what this property was it was a north side and a south side that we connected along the back with the breezeway. It has 14 units, 7 on the north side, 7 on the south, and splitting it up that way really allows it to feel like you're only sharing with 6 other people as opposed to the whole house. So the way it's organized is that back connector is a breezeway, but that's where all of the community facilities are. So that's the large kitchen, dining room area. And then on the next slide, you can see we have a big great room on either side with a hearth, a piano, a sitting area. These are some of our residents. Okay, next slide. So this is a quick overview of some of the characteristics of our buildings and the type of seniors who live there. And these are some of the factors I think that will influence the need for this as one of several options. We've got a lot of changing demographic factors in older adults, many people never being married, higher divorce rate, fewer children. So changing the family dynamics is going to mean that people are going to have to think about creating their support systems a little bit differently. An inadequate housing stock in a very tough rental market in Los Angeles and other cities where the average rent is about $1,700, and you see the average income of our seniors is $1,084, so that's going to be a challenge. And shared housing is really one way to just think more creatively about what we either do with our existing housing stock as we rehab it, or how we create new in a way that the homes are more flexible. And if something's really thoughtfully planned to support something like this, and you've thought about where people will have their private and public space, then it can be much more successful than if it's an afterthought. Okay, and I included this, I just saw this story about a week or so ago. These women are living in Mission Valley, Montana, and they are 5 widowed sisters ranging in age from 80 to 92. The youngest had a home that she had lived in for several years, and she floated the idea to her sisters, all who had been recently widowed, one as recently as 2013, and said, well, why don't we all live together? It would be better than living alone. We all sort of live in the same general area anyway. So they pooled their resources and they added 3 bedrooms to this lady's home and expanded one of the rooms to sort of accommodate this living together. And they've been doing it for about 6 months now. 2 of the women actually have pretty serious vision issues, so they were starting to have trouble living on their own anyway. And the other 3 were just thinking ahead and thinking it'll be nice, it'll be better to live together than to live alone. And I thought it was a wonderful story of how families are doing this. Okay, so that's my piece. I look forward to your questions, and Donna is going to come back up here and talk to you about the next gen home, which is the home ownership model of shared housing.
Another option for co-housing in many ways is what LENNAR has developed called the next gen home. And it really is 2 homes under 1 roof. And back in, probably 2010, LENNAR was looking for a big idea. You know, we've built homes for many, many years. What is a new thing that would reinvigorate the home building industry, especially during the rough times, 2008, 9, 10, 11. And just looking at the research, apparently Pew Research analyzed some census data, and at that point in time, 2010, almost 17% of the households in the United States were multi-generational, in that there was 2 adult generations living together. And then projecting forward with the baby boomers that would soon be retiring, that 8,000 a day would reach the age of 65. That's certainly a burgeoning number that would need housing, different housing considerations. And also at that time, there was a big growth in the boomerangs. Younger children going to college, seeking their own way, and then finding themselves back at home. for economic reasons or otherwise. So to that, LENNAR started developing we could go a couple of slides now. The back one. Back in June of 2011, we started working with architects, just developing what could this concept be? How could we, is there such a thing as a home within a home? What would it be? How do we care for our aging parents and make it work? So through the summer, we came up with the concepts, and by December of that year, 2011, we had models opened. And we started it in Arizona, and it was very well received in the communities there. Today, we have 40 different floor plans that incorporate this home within a home. It's within 100 different communities throughout where LENNAR develops across the country. And that's 10 states and 20 different markets. To date, I believe we've welcomed somewhere around 2,000 families into a next-gen home. So the idea of two homes under one roof. We were really the first production home builder to move forward with this concept in our production efforts. The next gen, it's really designed to provide a balance, as much privacy as the family and the individual wants, and as much togetherness. Because I think that's, especially as I would look at my father and how he wanted to be with his family, but then he really had his fill of his family. And he needed his own space. I think this would have been a fabulous option. So what it is we call it the Next Gen Suite. So it features a private entrance, oftentimes usually a separate parking space, a great room that's a living area with a kitchenette, a private bedroom and bathroom. So that's all within this suite area. The next slide, perhaps. The one thing, it's very different than the casita, because I think a lot of people thought, oh, well, this is just another version of the casita. In many ways, the casita is somewhat like the granny flat of years ago. A unit that was, or a living space that was located above something, so often the garage. The next gen, you don't have the challenge of stairs. You're completely contained within. Again, so, and the other feature is you have locking doors with it between the next gen suite and the main home, much like you would in a hotel suite for adjoining rooms. So that really does support the togetherness and the privacy. So some photos we have going forward. The plan really has evolved. We've tried to incorporate it into higher density, lower density. It really has been quite an exercise, because we really wanted to be able to offer this just about anywhere, because it really, not only does it accommodate perhaps aging relative, your boomerang or relatives, long-term guests, there's much utility for it. But this is probably a photograph of how it's typically developed. And this is a slide that kind of shows the great room. So you see how we have a living space. The aging person could have her own friends, his own friends over. It could even be an aging couple, and they can cook for themselves. Not a big lasagna dinner perhaps, but make that work. And then and you can see there the slide actually shows the separate entry that would be coming from the courtyard. And then the next slide, this would be a typical bedroom. And once we brought it forward, it really did become, there was a lot of buzz about it. It was something new at a time when home building was struggling, without a doubt. And it did meet a need of many in the home buying community. once again, back to the idea that there's no one size fits all, this would be it has been an appealing opportunity for many. And then even in the New York Times, it talked about what a vibrant and extreme example of a production home builder really doing something out of the box to meet the changing demands of our life. So the concept of shared mortgages is a good thing. It works. And your neighbors are really your friends, your family. I think much like how Rachel spoke about keeping our aging population within neighborhoods, there's a great demand for that. There's those that don't want, that want the enclaves, and those that need something different. So in our toolbox, we have more tools to choose from. So thank you.
So let's open it up for questions. I'm sure there's questions out there.
Question. It's really for both. Both models seem like they would be up against a lot of zoning laws because of so many cities don't like granny flats and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering how you guys are addressing that and how much success you're having with that.
Well, the two examples that I showed, did we have them?
Yeah, I think so, because I don't think this will reach. We could try. That's about as much as we get.
The two examples that I showed you are in areas that are zoned for higher density rentals. So it wasn't, we specifically, in the 80s, I think targeted areas where that wouldn't be as much of a challenge. I think probably in urban areas, it's not as challenging as it would be to do it in more suburban, less dense neighborhoods. I think one thing though that we've noticed even with our larger affordable multifamily developments, especially in the city of LA, is that communities are a little more open when you say that it's seniors. They still have some concerns around parking, but that population to them is not as, I think, overwhelming or scary. And when you come at it, especially as a nonprofit, saying that you're trying to enhance this community's ability to support all of its residents, that it's typically well received.
The next gen home, it's interesting. The zoning has been challenges in certain communities. Where it started in Arizona, it was basically universally accepted. In California, we've had cities that were really challenged by it, and it's interesting, one of the primary challenges was due to parking. So when we would provide the garage, a parking space, so that it wasn't parking out on the street and spillover that so many communities had experienced, then it was far easier to be accepted. And then there was also concerns from the jurisdictions about them being rental units, so you're actually creating extra units. Well, because it's a home within a home, most usually that would be, we could expand, get beyond the gap there. Because, and when we would look at it, we would open a community, the next gen would be one floor plan of maybe 3, 4, or 5 plans offered. So it would be a very limited number. And most people buying homes wouldn't seek that option for an investment opportunity. So that with some work and shared successes in other areas, the jurisdictions would welcome it.
I have a question for Donna. Rachel, last night we were talking about Airbnb. Have any of your next gen homes been used as an Airbnb rental where they invite strangers into the neighborhood and rent out the room?
I don't know of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has happened. It's really interesting. In some areas, cities wanted a deed restriction or some type of covenant that people would not rent them. And that was one way of addressing the concern about rentals. And then in other areas, it hasn't. So then it just becomes much like how you live. You know, do you have a roommate? Do they stay there forever? And we don't keep track, we haven't kept track of that.
And one other question, do you ever, you know, I have a younger generation looking to buy a home. Do you ever have two families buy a home not related?
We probably have had that, but not necessarily with the next gen. That would be more of a family pooling their resources for the sort of an aging adult situation.
Donna, on that point, with regard to sharing, you mentioned sharing a mortgage, and it's not atypical for two family members to go in together and share a mortgage. But what about if there are multiple residents that want to share the mortgage that are unrelated? Have you looked into that at all?
I have not, and I couldn't speak to that. That's a very good question, because it's almost like the next evolution of how we will use this opportunity.
Help the Gen Y get into
Right.
Anyone else? I have an interesting story. Last week, our team up north did a tour through a lot of the Santa Clarita Valley, because they hadn't seen so much of the new product that's on the new home ranch. One of which was LENNAR's community, and I love walking models and just listening to people. They don't know we're industry people. But it was funny because we were in one of your next gen models, and actually the section was probably that was cordoned off was bigger than the house I live in now. Yeah, but I was totally eavesdropping on a family that was there with 2 generations, and obviously the son and his wife were saying, well, we'll just live here. If your mom doesn't want to give up the big family house, the pride factor was part of the decision and why she didn't want to leave her home. So they said, this is plenty of room for us. She can have the big house until she's ready to not have the big house, and we'll stay in the smaller section of her home.
Wow.
So it was like 1,400 square feet or something. It wasn't super small, and it addressed every need you'd need as a couple. Closet space, just enough of a kitchen, your own entrance. Even the backyard was kind of sectioned off the way they'd merchandised it. So it was really well done. I have a question for Rachel. So are you guys actually does ALA buy these facilities and operate them?
In most cases, we do. We're actually doing a project up in Lancaster area of LA County right now where we're purchasing single-family homes with some money that the Department of Health is giving us, and we will own and operate those homes and do some moderate rehab to them so that they can accommodate shared living. But that first building I showed you just north of the Grove is actually a 50-year lease we had with the City of LA. So we lease it from them for a very small amount, and we get to operate it for as long as we're providing a service to low-income seniors. And we're coming up on the expiration of that lease, and so I think there's talks about what will we do, will we own it outright, and but yeah, in most cases we own it or we're leasing it from the city.
Interesting.
I have a question for Rachel. How significant is this shared housing movement across the country? Is this kind of isolated here in LA, or is this really a big movement in the country?
There's the 2 different models that I talked about. So the match-up programs of matching individuals to share in their own personal home that they already own, which you could do in a next-gen home, is, I think, expanding even faster. The shared living residences, though, also happens. It seems like it's expanding to other populations besides seniors, and so it's really nonprofits are doing it to deal with veterans who are returning and need of the affordability and also like the support of living with people who have had shared experiences. But I would say that there's about 50 member organizations across the country in 28 states that are part of that National Shared Housing Resource Center and either offer the shared living residences and the group homes or the matching up services. I think what's also happening though is, and this goes to the question about multiple people on mortgages, is that there's a growing number of more affluent baby boomer women who are proactively thinking ahead of wanting to have a home with all the amenities and going in with a few of their friends so that they can afford to live in a very nice area in a nice neighborhood without putting all that financial risk on themselves. And so there's a group in Asheville, North Carolina that's created a community around this. There's a lady named Bonnie Moore outside of Baltimore, Maryland, and they're starting to write books and guides for women so that women can kind of get together. And all these women are professional lawyers or accountants, so they've been really thoughtful about thinking, how does this work in terms of contracts and rules, and if someone wants to sell and move, and I've seen that grow a little bit more. And then I think in the sector that I work in around affordability and really supporting people who don't have as many options, it's consistently been this sort of need.
So I have a two-part question. First part of it is, with the shared housing, is there evidence that people are living, I guess, more quote-unquote independently together, whereas they don't need as much care as they age, number one? And number two, another aging in place question is, when a member of the household becomes more infirm, for example, and really that the other residents can't really take care of them because of their own health issues, what support mechanisms are there for maybe to keep them in the home, and maybe if there's an ability for like a live-in caregiver that is shared amongst the residents?
I think to address your second question, I think what happens is that it doesn't prevent the need for a higher level of care, but it may prolong it by several years. And the advantage is that you have several people sort of looking out and aware of deterioration if it is happening with someone. We recently had a resident pass away who was 98 years old, and at that point she needed a visiting nurse, and so she had a personal caregiver coming in to help her bathe and groom. And then she also had Meals on Wheels, and when she would have an incident, go to a hospital and be discharged, she would have physical therapy for a certain amount of time. And so as the managers of the building, we leave a lockbox outside so that all these service providers have access to this individual. And so it was really kind of gave her the stability she needed so she could access some of these other services that were already available. And she ended up passing away in that unit. But in instances where someone needed a lot of skilled care, they would eventually need to make that transition. And to your first question, I don't know that it's really been researched or studied that much. And I think there's a big push in the industry to study it and create more evidence, because if you can talk about saving Medicaid dollars and diverting nursing home residents, you could access new streams of funding.
Interesting. There were some questions over here? No?
Sorry, Rachel, I'm still asking you questions. Could you share with the group the difference between co-housing and shared housing?
Yeah, the shared housing is typically the, like I said, it's all under one roof, and so it's not quite a multifamily rental building because there's more shared amenities, but it's not your own private residence that you might get in a co-housing community. And the co-housing developments that I've seen are beautiful, and they have sort of more of a campus feel to them. So there's different unit types, and there's rental and ownership. But what happens in those communities is from the very beginning, there's this group of people coming together all with the same intention, and they're part of the design process, they're part of the process of coming up with the rules and the regulations, and they get to see the project from start to finish kind of be built and realized, and then they move in. And these people are very proactive. They're planning for what they want their community to be, they're investing in it, and they're very kind of forward thinking. With shared housing, a lot of times people are doing it a little bit more reactionary. So, you know, ALA is the nonprofit that's created this option, but we often have people coming to us in moments of major life transitions or crises where they're doing this out of a need, and it's not something that they were really planning for. And many times they move in and they think of it as a stepping stone. So I will stay here while I wait 4 years on an affordable housing wait list. And then they develop friendships. In a house of 14 people, you meet 1 or 2 people that you really connect with. And they usually can't beat the affordability, and once they've kind of worked through the initial transition period and figured out how to make it work, they end up staying just as long as any of the other residents in our communities.
That's great. Any other questions this morning? Pamela?
Are your wait lists as long as Section 8 housing wait lists, and do those programs overlap in any way?
They don't overlap in Los Angeles. They are similar in length. It's just the way it is in Los Angeles. But they actually do overlap in Dallas, Texas. There's a program, a lady there, Maria Machado, who's worked with her local housing authority. And so what she does is she develops shared housing, and the housing authority funds her to take people and house them while they're on the housing authority's wait list. And then once their name comes up on the wait list, they have the option to take that voucher and move to another private apartment, or they can stay in the shared living residence if they'd like. But the housing authority likes the idea of subsidizing them in shared housing because it's half the cost of a private unit.
Did they ever do this for non-age restricted people?
They do. They do it for typically disenfranchised, more vulnerable populations as a way to more effectively and efficiently provide supportive services, and also to just recognize these individuals need an option. If they can't have access to a deep subsidy, they need an option that's below the market rate.
Interesting. It would seem to be motivating at all ages. You know, that chemistry and synergy that happens when you're all together in that common area.
Well, and I think there's, it's happening a lot in the UK and in Australia. People are very used to having flatmates, and in the UK they actually incentivize it with a tax scheme, and it's called a rent-a-room. And if you rent a room to someone, you're creating another housing unit, and the government will allow you to earn up to a certain amount of money, and they won't tax you on. And it's a different kind of culture and attitudes in other parts of the world than it is here in the US. So we really are combating some biases towards independence and privacy. And I think it's, there's a lot of people who this is a big lifestyle change for, and then there's other people that have always been more open to it.
Gina, there's Grey's Anatomy where,
Right.
where you have a lot of doctors that are doing the residency, and they don't need a kitchen. They just need a place to crash. And so there's a lot of other non-low income and senior adult situations which would support this kind of housing.
We've heard about it a number of times in Silicon Valley, where they'll actually do it on a basis where they rent the bed because they're working and they're high tech and they're young and they just need someplace, and it's extraordinarily expensive, and so they'll basically sleep in shifts.
Oh, interesting. Any other questions?
It's crazy, but they do it.
It works. Well, please join me and give me a round of applause for our fantastic program. As we get ready to do a raffle, if you could get your cards to Amy. Did everyone get their cards in there? Next month, we have another great program lined up for you as we're getting those cards collected. And actually, our speaker joined us this morning. Ronald, would you like to get up and introduce yourself?
Sure.
You have the flyer on your table.
Yay. Hi, everyone. My name's pronounced funny, but so my name's Ramel.
Sorry.
And no, it's fine. I actually my name gets pronounced differently just about everywhere besides what it's actually spelled at. So I blame my parents for that because they gave me kind of a funky name. But I do. Great topic today, and perfect segue to next month. We're going to be talking about understanding and bridging the differences in generations. Have you ever looked at someone like in your offices as clients, and you just like of a different generation, and you just wondered, what is wrong with me? Right, anyone here? I remember once doing an interview. I was interviewing for an entry-level position, a sales position, a few years ago before I started my company. And this person showed up in the interview wearing a Hollister hoodie, flip-flop jeweled sandals though. I'm like, what are you doing? And I thought maybe she was the exception. No. She was well-dressed, okay, compared to some of the people I went. And it was just a complete mind shift, you know? And so we have these battles, we have these differences, because every generation thinks a little bit differently, sees things a little bit differently, perceives things a little bit differently, and then we all got to work together and play nice, right? And so next month, we're going to talk about the different generations, the characteristics of each, and maybe more importantly, how you start to connect and communicate and speak each other's languages. Because even if you think they're total morons, right, which you do, right, like, gee, right, you still need them, right? We need each other in lots of different ways, and as they showed in today's presentation, you can see how much the shift is happening, like with the housing shift. You know, even in, like, I'm an entrepreneur, in offices, what we're seeing a lot of is, like, especially the millennials doing shared office spaces, right? And not wanting their little individual enclaves, but having these where they all meet in these open things. And so we're seeing those shifts. So next month, we're going to do a crash course in that. It's going to be fun and entertaining. And even if you've been to a ton of things about generational differences, I know you're going to find something that you will like. So look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
We're not here, we're at Perch, which is over in SoCo in Costa Mesa. We'll make sure the flyer has all the addresses and everything, but we're changing venues up a little bit for this one.
And
so.
we're inviting our next.
And we're doing it with the Next Gen Council, so we'll have some extra youth in the crowd. As usual, you guys will be receiving an email survey questions. We really value your opinions and love your ideas on how we can keep these great programs going. So as part of that, we donate $1 to HomeAid for every survey we get back. So in the next probably 48 hours, you'll be seeing that hit your email. Please participate. I made the mistake of forgetting one of our newest sponsors this morning. Advanced Exercise is here. I want to thank you very much for your support and acknowledge you as for being a new member and sponsor. Thank you so much. And so March 19th, make sure to be at Perch at SoCo. And then our April program is our tour. We're doing our tour a little bit earlier this year. We're going to be at Azulon in Costa Mesa. On that note, I just wanted to say thank you again for all your support and joining the fun this morning and our speakers. Thank you so much and have a fantastic day.